you, Rachel. So the morning session will be divided into two phases. In the first phase, we'll provide updates. So there is an update on regulatory developments. And just after the coffee break, an update on international developments. And then there will be another part, which will be more interactive, where we will report about the activities we have undertaken as a result of the feedback we received from you at the conference last year and in through other forms of communication, other channels. So it's now my pleasure to invite Carl and Rodrigo to talk to you about recent developments in the rulemaking area. So Carl and Rodrigo, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourselves, and we'll be happy to hear about updates on rulemaking.
Thank you, everybody. So good morning. It's a pleasure to see so many of you today. The place is indeed very beautiful. My name is Rodrigo Priego, and I work in the Certification Directorate, and I lead a team that is responsible for our initial airworthiness rules. And today we're going to be walking you through everything we're doing related to Regulation 748, also known as Part 21. So you're going to be hearing about new or updated requirements for design and production organizations. We're going to tell you how we are adapting Part 21 to enable the certification of UAS, as well as their common units. We're going to be speaking about a new Part 21, which we call Part 21 Lite, and Carl is going to come to the stage to give you all the details on Part 21 Lite. We're going to be touching on noise and emissions very briefly, and towards the end, we will be happy to share what we are thinking when it comes to the certification of equipment, of parts and articles. And for those who have seen me doing the Part 21 update before, I like to do this in reverse order. We have different projects which are at different stages of maturity, and I like to start with those rules that are already applicable and move all the way back to our design table and tell you about things that we are still discussing internally and we will be sharing with you. So I'm not sure this is, okay. Oh. The first piece of regulation I wanted to mention is related to the implementation of safety management systems in Part 21. Part 21 is actually the last domain in our regulatory framework in which we have transposed or embedded the ICAO Annex 19 requirements. To simplify it, what we're doing here is just we're adding a new tool to the toolbox that we have in initial airworthiness. So we have certification specifications to ensure the safety of the products. We have also requirements that design organizations have to comply with, and I'm talking about design assurance systems, and for production, these are quality systems, and we are adding now the different elements of the SMS as described in Annex 19, and of course, we need to make the two systems coexist and work with each other. We published an opinion in 2020, and this opinion was adopted by the European Commission. You will see that when we change Part 21, there are two regulations that are published, an implementing regulation and a delegated regulation. These are not new requirements, it's just the way the process works at the Commission and the way our rules are adopted. We published the first set of acceptable means of compliance and guidance material in December of last year, and this was more tailored to those requirements affecting organizations. And we published the last set of ANC and guidance material on Friday of last week. This was addressing more the requirements of authorities. I said the rule has already become applicable since March of this year. So we are already working on implementation, and organizations will have now 2 years to comply with any findings raised by authorities, which give us a bit of time to still work with many of you to achieve full compliance. As you know, we have a dedicated day tomorrow to speak about SMS, where you will receive more details on the rules themselves, but also how we are planning the oversight, and where we will be listening to those organizations who have started the journey and try to address the concerns and answer questions. So I can only encourage you to take part on that workshop tomorrow, which is taking place in our EASA premises, but also with the possibility to attend online. And now I would like to give the floor to Carl, who is going to speak to you about Part 21 Lite. So Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I'm really pleased to be able to present to you the topic of Part 21 Lite, which is a significant step forward for EASA in terms of proportionality for general aviation. Those of you familiar with Part 21 will realize that there's not a lot of proportionality within the regulation, and previous attempts to introduce proportionality came across the blocking points within the basic regulation. With the new basic regulation from 2018, it gave EASA the regulatory tool set to be able to introduce more proportionality to avoid the need for always having to have an organizational approval and always having to issue a certificate for a product and allowing the use of declarations. So now EASA has that regulatory tool set to be able to try and introduce more proportionality for products which are lower risk. It's worth noting that Part 21 Lite exists within a dedicated annex to Regulation 748, and that was deliberate. We created Part 21 Lite in a separate annex, so we would not directly affect anything within Annex 1, which is for the more wider products which are higher risk. So Part 21 Lite exists in a dedicated annex, and that allowed us a lot of flexibility in how we developed it and also how we introduced different proportionality within it. It's worth noting that Annex 1, so for Part 21, is still applicable for ELA 1 and ELA 2. So a GA manufacturer can still decide to use Part 21 for their products if they're more familiar with that or if they have a design organization approval. However, hopefully we've made Part 21 Lite attractive enough for any manufacturer to want to use Part 21 Lite for their product certification. So within Part 21 Lite, for a dedicated scope of products, we have two possibilities. We have the so-called Lite certified process or the Lite declared process. Under the Lite certified process, a type certificate is issued for the product with verification by EASA, verification of compliance. The type certificate has the same value as a type certificate issued under Part 21. There is no Lite TC. It's the same TC. However, the means to achieve certification is very different. And hopefully I'll show you that later on, how that verification focus is different. Each individual aircraft is issued with a certificate of airworthiness in the same way as Part 21. The real novelty lies in the declared process. For a more limited scope of products, we would permit the manufacturer to declare compliance of their design without verification by EASA. However, the person making the declaration has 100% full responsibility for compliance. We would register that declaration of compliance, which would then enable the national authority to issue a restricted certificate of airworthiness for that aircraft. Why is it restricted? Because the basic regulation states that any aircraft which does not have a TC and is declared has to be issued with a restricted certificate of airworthiness. In reality, in terms of the ops regulation, there are no differences under Regulation 965 for the use of the aircraft. However, that restricted certificate of airworthiness would only be valid within EASA member states. So there's no export possibilities because it's not ICAO compliant, it does not have a TC. In terms of scope, you'll notice on the left-hand side we have the declared aircraft, on the right the certified aircraft, and there's a much wider scope for Lite certified compared to Lite declared. And that's because with the Lite declared aircraft, there's no verification of compliance by EASA, and so we have a much more limited scope in terms of exposure and weight classification. On the right-hand side, thanks to the involvement of EASA in the verification, we can offer a much wider scope of products for the type certification of those products. In terms of design capability, one of the main novelties of Part 21 Lite is for the difference in organizational requirements in terms of design capability. For light declared aircraft, there are no formal design organization requirements, meaning there's no requirement for DOA, APDOA, or declared design organization. However, the person making the declaration has design obligations and responsibilities in the same way as a TC holder. Under the light certified process, we would have two options where an organization can become a declared design organization. It's worth noting that this is not a fire and forget. There is oversight from EASA of the declared design organization. Alternatively, if the organization already has a DOA, we would accept that and they can use the privileges granted under Part 21. It's worth noting for a declared design organization, we are unable to grant privileges because the basic regulation states that only an approved organization can have those privileges. And that was one of the constraints we had in Part 21 Light. For production, for Light certified, so for certified products, we have two possibilities. The production organization can become a declared production organization, again with oversight from the national authority. It's not an empty declaration. And that would permit them to issue a Form 52 Bravo for full aircraft. The reason why it's Bravo is because that would trigger the need or the possible need for the national authority to conduct a conformity inspection. Again, that's on a risk basis. It's not for every single aircraft that's produced, but they have that possibility. And also that declared production organization can issue an EASA Form 1 without any further showing. If the organization has a production organization approval, then they can obviously use those privileges within Part 21 Light as well. For declared aircraft, we have even more possibilities, and this is purely for a cascade of logic. I'm going to start on the right-hand side. We have, if you have a POA or an approved production organization, obviously they can use their privileges when producing declared aircraft. If the manufacturer wants to become a declared production organization, but they don't have to, they can become a declared production organization with oversight from the national authority, and this could be a way of them progressing into the certified domain. As a minimum, we've created Subpart R in Part 21 Light, which provides the minimum set of production organization requirements to produce a declared aircraft. And that's the bare skeleton of a production organization. Both of those two options can use EASA Form 52 Bravo when producing aircraft and applying for a restricted certificate of airworthiness, and that this triggers the possibility for the national authority to conduct a conformity inspection on a risk basis. They're not going to do every single one, and if they have a good relationship with the production organization, that will not be necessary. They can also issue an EASA Form 1 for parts that they've produced. During the consultation and focus consultation of Part 21 Light, the feedback we received was that a lot of manufacturers didn't want to wait until the next product certification or the next major change or STC. They wanted to use Part 21 straight away. So we listened, and within the regulation, we offered the possibility for an existing TC or STC holder to migrate their certificate into Part 21 Light and start using Part 21 Light directly for those certificates. There's a 3-year window, which we've included within the regulation, and they have 3 years to do that migration into Part 21 Light. And any new existing TC holder can use that possibility. However, it is a one-way street. There's no possibility to go back into Part 21 Light, Part 21, sorry, once that option has been taken. I'm going to very quickly step you through some of the differences in the milestones for Part 21 Light, which will hopefully show you how they differ from Part 21. So for the Light certified process, a type certification basis is approved and agreed with EASA. And that allows us to include special conditions and any novel items within the design. So that's an important step compared to the declared process. A compliance demonstration plan is provided by the applicant and agreed with EASA in terms of what means of compliance and how they intend to show compliance. At some point in the development of the product, the applicant is going to want to do demonstration flying and request a permit to fly, and that's the trigger point for EASA and the national authority and the manufacturer to get together and have the first critical design review. And this is where we look at what's been designed, look at the product, and discuss the way forward for that product. And as long as everything goes well during that on-site visit, the EASA would issue the flight conditions for the permit to fly, and the national authority would issue the permit to fly. And that's an important milestone. This is our first oversight visit of the applicant and of the declared design organization. At the end of demonstration compliance flying, then the applicant declares compliance, and that triggers the second intervention point, which is the first article inspection. Again, this is a joint activity, EASA, the national authority, and the applicant on site doing a product-focused oversight visit of the product, using the product itself to convince ourselves of compliance, which is very different to the current process today. During that first article inspection, we have the possibility to review compliance documentation. We can do witnessing of testing. We can also do test flying. And at the end of that visit, as long as there are no findings raised, EASA would issue the type certificate and the national authority would issue the first certificate of airworthiness. Hopefully you can see that's a very different focus to the current Part 21 process. I'm going to show you the declared process and convince you that it's very, very different in terms of the involvement of EASA. For starters, there's no certification basis agreed. The declarant selects the technical specification they want to use for the declaration. A compliance demonstration plan is developed and provided to EASA, but not approved by EASA. At some point during the development of the product, the declarant, the manufacturer, is going to want to do test flying and demonstration of compliance flying, and that's where they would request flight conditions and a permit to fly. At that point, that's the first trigger for EASA and the national authority to go to the manufacturer and conduct a safety review of the product. Again, responsibility for compliance rests with the declarant. EASA is just ensuring that the safety of flight of the product to continue with demonstration of compliance flying. As long as there are no issues raised by the national authority or EASA, then the permit to fly would be issued and the flight conditions by EASA would be issued. At the end of demonstration of compliance flying, this is the important step where the declarant declares the compliance of the design with the technical specifications which they selected, and that is submitted to EASA. That would then trigger the second intervention point where, again, EASA, the national authority, would conduct a first article inspection visit to the facilities of the manufacturer and the designer to conduct a first article inspection of the product. This, again, using the product-focused focus, would then look at how the designer has ensured the safety of the product, and providing there are no issues raised during that first article inspection, EASA would register the declaration, which then empowers it to have the NAA to issue restricted certificates of airworthiness. We have the possibility to register and deregister that declaration of design compliance in the same way as a TC. Where are we in the process? I'm very pleased to inform you we're very advanced in the process. The regulation itself was approved in July last year and became applicable as of the 25th of August, and therefore is live and can be used. And I'm very pleased to inform you that last Friday we published the AMC and guidance material to accompany the regulation. So we have the full package now available. Very shortly we'll prepare the easy access version to allow the community to easily see the AMC and regulations side by side. And we're very excited to have any pilot projects in the very near future and start to better develop our mutual understanding of this regulation and provide that much needed proportionality to this stakeholder community. And with that, I'll hand back to Rodrigo. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carl. So we're switching gears now, and I'm going to mention two projects for which we have already published an opinion, but these opinions, these requirements are not yet applicable. Hopefully. The first one is in the area of information security. With information security, we're trying to include requirements to provide the aviation system, so organizations and authorities, against security risks, and to again include the tools to manage cybersecurity incidents and to recover from them. This project is a bit different from the ones I have mentioned before, because what we have done is go for an approach that includes the same set of regulations applicable to all aviation domains. So the regulations that you see on the top right, which are two, create a new entity in itself in our regulatory framework and apply not only to initial airworthiness, but also to operators, to continuing airworthiness management organizations, to ATM providers, and so on and so forth. And basically, there are two sets of requirements, the ones for organizations and the ones from authorities. And as you can imagine, we also have to connect these requirements so that we enable the oversight of this regulation also with the domain-specific regulations. We published an opinion with the provisions in 2021, and these provisions are now adopted, again, by way of two regulations and implementing a delegated regulation. The acceptable means of compliance and guidance material for all domains have been published in July of this year after they were consulted with advisory bodies. What is different here is that the rules will become applicable in 3 years after they have been published, so this is giving a bit of time for us and for the organizations and authorities to prepare for the implementation. When it comes to initial airworthiness, we have a number of pilot projects that we are running with a few design organizations to see how this is going to work. And our colleagues in the Strategy and Safety Management Directorate who are running these projects will plan an implementation workshop towards the second half of 2024 with all affected stakeholders. I wanted to conclude by showing you a bit that the AMCs and guidance material come in 3 packages. So in 3 ED decisions, there's one ED decision that contains all the AMCs affecting the so-called cover regulations. There's another package with the AMCs and guidance material for organizations, and there's a third package that contains all the guidance material for authorities. Different project now, we are in the area of UAS and VTOL. In August of this year, we published an opinion that affected several domains, but also amended Part 21 to enable the certification of those UAS that are subject to certification, but also it contained or it proposed a new continuing airworthiness regulations to ensure the continuing airworthiness of UAS that are subject to certification or operated in the specific category, and a number of operational provisions to enable VTOL capable aircraft to operate. So there were a number of changes in different regulations. In Part 21 in particular, if I can summarize, the main novelty is the fact that we enable procedures to certify the so-called command units with the possibility to include the certification as part of the UA type design and the option to have a separate TC for the command unit itself. The opinion was published in August of this year, as I mentioned, taking into consideration the comments we received during the consultation organized the year before, and we presented this opinion to the European Commission and the member states last week. So far, receiving positive feedback, but of course now they have a period of time in which they can send more comments that we will be addressing together with the European Commission. But the Commission has already shared plans to have these provisions adopted in 2024, which means that for Part 21, we have to work now on developing acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, and for that, we are aiming to publish an NPA towards the second quarter of 2024. I'm switching gears again, and I'm touching now on 2 NPAs that we still plan to publish before the end of this year. And the first one is what we call a regular update. So a regular update for us is an opportunity to do minor repairs and updates on our Part 21. So here we take into consideration the feedback that we receive from those implementing the rules, being our own colleagues, but also many of you who are sharing with us things that can be improved. So there will be a number of topics. It's difficult to list them all, but to mention a couple, we're going to be updated the competences for the pilots performing OSD flights, which are included in an annex to Part 21. We're going to take the opportunity to recognize some of the industry standards in the domain of design that are available as acceptable means to comply with the rules. We will publish an opinion with those provisions in the second quarter of 2024, and we will also intend to update the AMC and guidance material before the end of 2024. In the area of noise and emissions, ICAO published in March of this year an update to volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Annex 16, which contains not necessarily new noise limits or new emission targets, but they updated the recommended practices. And what we will be doing with the NPA that we intend to publish before the end of the year is recognizing that updates not only in Part 21, but also our basic regulation needs to be updated that is directly referenced in the ICAO chapters. And this will lead to an opinion in the second quarter of 2024 that will be combined with the one I mentioned before. Like I said, you should still, or we're still targeting to have this published before the end of this year for public consultation, so you will have a chance to comment on these two projects. And I'm reaching now the end of the presentation with two different topics. As I said at the beginning, these are topics that we are still concepts or the initial phase, but we wanted nevertheless to share them with you so that you know what we have on the pipeline and also to tell you how you can get involved in providing input. The first one has to do with non-installed equipment. Non-installed equipment is a new definition that you can read when you go to Basic Regulation, Article 3, it's on the screen. Non-installed equipment is basically equipment that is carried on board the aircraft, which is not part of the type design, and it can be used, or is intended to be used to operate or control the aircraft, to support occupant survivability, or which has have an impact on the safe operation of the aircraft. So what has changed is that before we have to ensure initial airworthiness of the product, including its parts and appliances, and now we're moving to a scenario in which we have to ensure the initial airworthiness of products and parts, but we have to come up with processes to ensure the certification of this new entity called non-installed equipment. I wanted to include a couple of pictures so that you know a bit what we are talking about. So you have the pictures of a megaphone and emergency lights. The difficulty here is that an equipment can be either installed or non-installed depending on its use. It's sometimes the design approval holder who decides to include it or not in the type design. And that's a bit part of where the difficulty resides. The good news is that we are intending to go for an approach that will require minimum changes in Part 21. So we have now requirements in the OPS rules, Regulation 965, that determine which equipment needs to be certified to be carried on board. We will not be changing that. When that equipment meets the definition of non-installed equipment, we will rely on an existing Part 21 process, which is the ETSO process. So we need to just update Part 21 to say that the ETSO process also applies to non-installed equipment. We will ensure an optional certification path when the non-installed equipment is not required, but we have standards available to issue an authorization. And more importantly, we need to work with our flight standards colleague to define which continuing airworthiness provisions are applicable to non-installed equipment, because at the moment, Regulation 1321 is not applicable to this type of equipment. So what's next here? We intend to publish an NPA amending Part 21 as well as Regulation 1321 before the third quarter of 2024. for public consultation, and we will be, of course, looking into all the comments that we will be receiving. And the final project that I will mention today has to do with the ETSO process itself. The ETSO process has been in Part 21 for quite some time now. And actually, most of the articles that receive an authorization use the path that you see on your right. So with alternative procedures for design organizations and with a POA. Only in the case of an APU, we use the path on the left where the organization has to be approved as a DOA. What we're seeing now, it's a bit in the same philosophy as Part 21 Lights, we have equipment that can be considered less complex and therefore maybe posing less risks, for which we have now new tools. And for example, we could use alleviations to the organizational requirements. And we have spoken, Carl has spoken about declarations, but also instead of having an authorization, the possibility to declare the product itself. So we're thinking that maybe this can be a more proportionate path to ensure the certification of this type of less complex equipment. And at the same time, we have a bit the opposite scenario in which we're seeing equipment for which certification could be closer to an APU, like for example, a command unit that I mentioned before, an FMS, an integrated modular avionics system, electric and hybrid propulsion systems in the future. So we think that maybe the path for certification in these cases could be a bit similar to the one that we use for an APU. So that's just a concept. That's our current thinking. And of course, here we are aware that we need to work a bit more on this proposal. So to define, for example, which equipment and based on what criteria will go into which path, we have to refine the path itself. So we have different possibilities to work with declarations on the right side. And we have, of course, to assess the impact. What is the impact for those organizations that are already using the system in terms of changes? And we are fully aware that there is also an impact on our bilateral relationships here as well. And as Rachel mentioned during the introduction, we are already exposing our bilateral partners to these concepts. We have been also presenting this to our advisory bodies and to the ETSO community. And what we foresee is that in 2024, we will probably organize a workshop to take further input on the proposals once they are a bit more mature. I'm reaching the end, and I wanted to conclude, of course, by thanking you for listening, but also to tell you that we are aware that there are a number of updates in Part 21, as hopefully became clear today. SMS, AMCs, cybersecurity, and so on. And of course, we have to update our easy access rules. So we will be working on this as a matter of priority. Thank you. Will you go ahead? Will you go ahead?
Thank you, Rodrigo and Carl. Very interesting presentation and some very innovative concepts, in particular on ETSO. So, dear guests, we now have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. Some of you started, so I would like to remind that if you want to ask questions, please connect to slido.com and use the code EASA CTC 2023. So we have a number of questions, and for the technicians, if we could activate the portable mic, the first one will be taken by Rachel Deschler, our director. And it's not the first on the list, but it's the one from Stéphane Boussu.
Yeah, so it's a question on resources, Part IS implementation, and other future ongoing changes. Does EASA have a robust resource plan to secure the capability of assessing all approved organizational changes? So some of you may have noticed that we have currently a bit of tension on resources in general and DOA resources in particular. We are working hard to come back to a more nominal situation for the DOA resources in particular. And regarding Part IS, well, the The good news about Part IS implementation is that it is quite nicely sequenced with SMS, meaning it comes after. So I think we are going now through the workload of assessing SMS changes over the next month, and Part IS entry into force and applicability is a little bit further down the road, which gives us more time to be prepared on both sides, including on training aspects, which are also important. So it's all work in progress.
Thank you, Rachel. So we'll go through the list. I don't see Francesco Caridei. Francesco, if you're in the room, if you can come to the front for some of the ETSO questions which you might wish to take. Thanks, Francesco. But maybe first on the VTOL aircraft, if you want to take it, Carl.
Sure. Okay, so does Part 21 Light cover VTOL aircraft? By that, I think that means eVTOL, or does it mean, if it means eVTOL, then no. If it means VTOL in terms of helicopters, then helicopters are included in the light certified process, up to a weight limit, I think, of 1,200 kilograms. Under the light declared side, there's no VTOL aircraft included within that. And that was deliberate because there's no design organization behind it, the declared aircraft. We felt at this time that we just limit VTOL aircraft to the light certified process where there's verification of compliance by EASA.
Thank you, Carl. Raluca, maybe you can mark the first two questions as answered. So the next one about ETSO, maybe Francesco, you want to take that one, and Rodrigo, you can complement, or the other way around?
I can start.
Okay.
Or I think Rachel maybe wants to say something.
Yeah, just a word on ETSO. We EASA work with industry to define the future ETSO process. Yes, obviously, yes. It's a significant change that we have in mind for the ETSO framework. And we plan to work not only with industry, but also with our regulatory partners. So I was presenting the concept to FAA, Transport Canada, and ANAC Brazil last week, and they were very interested. I think there is a shared recognition that our TSO regulatory framework is dated and deserves rethinking. And but on the other hand, TSO automatic recognition is a significant achievement of our bilateral agreement. So a TSO that is granted in the US is automatically accepted in Europe and vice versa. So this is something we want to protect, and because of that, and not only, we think it would be very interesting to try to work with our regulatory partners to try to evolve the framework together, and of course closely associated with industry.
Thank you, Rachel. I don't know, Rodrigo, if you want to take the next one to give a few examples of advanced ETSO.
So advanced ETSO is just a name that we put in the categories. It should not be taken further than that, but it will mean the category that has the more stringent requirements. And at the moment, we have the APU in that category, in which design organizations will need a DOA. And the idea is that when it comes to the installation of some complex articles, that could be also appropriate for other more complex articles. But the advanced is just the name that we're using. Just keep in mind that at the moment it's just a concept and that we need to work on it.
Francesco, do you want to add anything on the advanced ETSO? Okay. Okay, thanks, Francesco. So the next one, NNAE, for you, Rodrigo.
So the issue is that 1321 does not apply to NE. And we're working with colleagues in FS to define what should be appropriate. I don't want to preempt the outcome of that discussion. There are different options on the table. So what requirements for 1321 will be applicable for the maintenance on NAE? I think there are different options, and that's more on their side, and there will be a proposal on that.
Thank you, Rodrigo. The next question is about NIEs as well. So will all ETSO articles become NIE in the future?
So the answer is no. What is non-installed equipment? It's in the basic regulation. It's just that we have now equipment that is meeting that definition. And when an initial airworthiness process is needed, we will be relying on the ETSO process. So the ETSO process will apply in the future both to parts and to some non-installed equipment.
Okay, thank you. Maybe, Carl, you can take the next one on the
Yeah, sure.
conformity.
So for Part 21 light, who's responsible for adequate conformity of test article and equipment? That's very straightforward. For both declared and the certified process, the manufacturer and designer is responsible for ensuring that the article that's tested is in conformance with the design data and represents that design data. That will also be reviewed possibly during the oversight visits, either the critical design review or the first article inspection, to ensure what we're seeing represents what was tested as well.
Thank you, Carl. So the next question, I think we might, from Alexander, we might keep that one for the next presentation on international, and either Mario or David Solar can take that one. So we keep it, the one on the EHang 216, for the next session. Maybe Carl, you can take the next question on Part 21 light. Oh, this one was done already. The third one is on NIEs.
I can give it a try. So as you saw towards the last part of the presentation, there are two steps. The first one is not amending the current ETSO process, and it will create a hook to non-installed equipment. On the second part, when we presented, I think it was labeled low risk or simplified. Those are the ideas that we have to simplify the process that will apply obviously as well to non-installed equipment. So that will come a bit in the second phase of what I presented towards the end, the simplification of the ETSO process.
Thank you, Rodrigo. So the next one can be answered quite quickly. I think for the DOA for advanced ETSO articles, in the current format, I think the answer is yes.
Yes, in the current thinking, that's the case, yes.
So do you take the next one from Luis Ignacio, Rodrigo? On, on information security, it was moved.
I'm happy to have the help of Juan here, who knows this better.
So Juan, you have a portable mic to the right there. So on information security, we'll have Juan Anton taking the question. Maybe Juan, you can introduce yourself first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Juan Anton. I'm section manager for DOA and policy issues, but I was 4 years section manager for cybersecurity, so I was responsible for the development of Part IS. So regarding the question if it is applicable to all DOAs, the requirements are applicable to DOAs, but not to ADOAs, not the alternative ones. Regarding the normal DOAs, in principle, it's applicable to all of them. For the smaller ones, of course, the approach is more proportional. We don't ask for the same. There is a derogation for organizations dealing only with ELA-2 aircraft or designing only ELA-2 aircraft or below.
It's included in the part.
And also there is a derogation where the competent authority, in the case of DOAs EASA, can exempt you from the requirements if you are able to demonstrate that you don't have risks dealing with cybersecurity. So depending on the type of design you are doing. I'm talking if you are designing, for example, carpets, maybe there is no significant issue. But at the end, it will be a discussion between authority and design organization. And it's a derogation that has to be reviewed periodically. But in principle, above ELA-2 is applicable to all the DOAs.
Thank you, Juan. Maybe the next question is quite relevant, and it's some feedback we receive regularly, in particular from smaller organizations who sometimes struggle to keep up with the pace of rule changes. So maybe, Rodrigo, you can take that one from
sorry, I'm still reading it.
The first one about the changes coming down the EASA pipeline towards the industry.
Best practice advice. So yeah, this is something we are currently thinking how to stay on top. I think things like what is going to happen tomorrow when it comes to the SMS workshop is one way that we think. We have to do that internally, by the way. And for example, for Part 21 Lights, we are designing our own training. And so I could see that also being extended in terms of sharing what is coming down the pipeline more often with the industry. And another tool that we have is, of course, having a bit of flexibility when it comes to the application. This is why we have, when it comes to SMS, 2 years to close the findings, 3 years for information security. This is why we have pilot projects. So that's a bit what we are currently thinking in terms of working with industry to stay on top of the various changes. I also want to say that I think this year we are finishing a number of big projects. And as you have seen, there is not, except maybe for the ETSO, which is a concept, we don't have so many big projects concurrently happening in Part 21 for the next years. So that will give us maybe a bit of stability and time to digest everything that is down the pipeline.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And I think some of these rule changes are driven by ICAO requirements on which we have limited control. I think Francesco might take the traditional question on LOI in ETSO. So maybe, Francesco, you can introduce yourself first, please.
Yes. So my name is Francesco Caridei. I am section manager for ETSO section. And yes, first of all, I want to say that LOI is already included for ETSO in Part 21. There is no proposal from the applicant because the applicant is not DOA. So we cannot formally evaluate the performance. So it's a total decision of the PCM, the involvement of the PCM. Second, we have one of the ideas to have for certain ETSOA to have DOA is exactly to develop LOI in a proper way, like for any other approval, like major change, STC, and so on. And who has already a DOA, in principle, as a TSOA under DOA, to be precise, then in principle we could develop a specific process that is not in the MC today, but we could in principle develop a DOA review item together to develop this LOI. But it's totally your initiative, it's voluntary basis, and then you have to think what to do. Please consider that we will evaluate your performance. And then it's really fundamental that, unfortunately, I have to say, the industry today, in my opinion, seems not fully ready to approach, because the DOA is producing the result that the company are a little bit dependent by EASA, while you have really to take your initiative to conduct the process. And this is the change you are in front of you.
Thank you, Francesco. Stay close to the mic, please, because there was another question which has disappeared now, but which will come back on the new ETSO. But maybe before that, I can give the floor to the rulemaking colleagues for the 2 questions on NIEs.
So the first one I can address, equipment not permanently installed, but specific for the mission. So really what makes equipment non-installed equipment is whether they are part of the type design or not. And I can think of examples of equipment that is required for a specific mission that still is part of the type design. Yeah, those equipment that are part of the type design will be in this case parts, not necessarily NA.
Rodrigo, you can address the next question on...
Okay, the one on accidents, yes. So the NA regulation is not clearly driven by accidents. It's coming from the times where we amended the basic regulation, which was already a few years ago. in which a new entity was created, but also a task for us to define the certification requirements. So at the moment, that path or that connection with Part 21 has not been created, and we have to do it. However, our intent is here to go for minimum changes. So basically, we will be using what we already have to certify non-installed equipment. We have, in some cases, ETSO articles that qualify the definition and for which we are de facto using the ETSO process. So hopefully, this will have minimal impact to Part 21 stakeholders.
Thank you, Rodrigo. We are getting towards the end of the session. We'll take maybe another couple of questions. So maybe, Francesco, you could address the question on the new ETSOs. If you can read it from where you are.
One from Dominique Kreutzer.
Yes.
Okay. This is all part of the work I have to do with Rodrigo. Rodrigo is in the lead of this activity. For sure, we will have a rulemaking process in which we will introduce an AE in Part 21 fully. And the process that will be used to approve an AE is a TSOA, for sure. This is clear. How this will be done, we want to work with you. And this is part also of the TSOA strategy, what already was mentioned by Rachel. So I'm not at the moment able to anticipate anything, because first we wanted to work a little bit, do a little bit of our homework, and then we would like to meet the industry and also the other partner, as also Rachel mentioned, to be sure that we are going the right direction. So I don't think it's good to mention anything at this stage.
Thank you, Francesco. I think maybe, Carl, we can take the two questions on Part 21 light,
Sure.
and then we will close the session.
Okay, so very quickly, looking at engines and propellers. Under the light certified process, it is possible to apply for an engine and propeller type certificate for a limited scope of engines and propellers. And they can then be installed on a product which is within the scope of Part 21 light. So you could get a TC for an engine propeller and install it on a Part 21 certified product, as long as that product is within the scope of Part 21 light. Under the declared process, there's no possibility to declare compliance of an engine and propeller standalone, but a manufacturer can either integrate a TC'd engine and propeller into their design, or declare compliance of the aircraft, engine, and propeller as a whole. The second one, looking at SAIL 5 and 6 for UAS. UAS are currently out of the scope of Part 21 light completely. There was a period of about 3 months where it was within the scope, and then we diverged and removed UAS from Part 21 light. So Part 21 light is purely for manned aircraft.
Thank you, Carl. So thank you, everyone, for these very interesting questions, and thanks to the colleagues for the accurate answers. So we'll now take the coffee break. Please be ready to start again at 11 o'clock, and I will invite the speakers of the next session to go to the technicians at the bottom of the room to get equipped. Thank you, and see you in half an hour.